Hello, seniors. This Care for Creation talk was given by Mrs. Conroy to every social justice senior group that I've taught over the last few years. It's unfortunate that you can't hear her. It's a very interesting talk, especially for those of you who might be interested in careers in this sort of field. So this will be a quick approximation of her remarks. This PowerPoint presentation is the one she created and uses as she talks. The project circled around a renovation at the Mother House. Their facilities were outdated. They were sadly in need of repair. There are several huge buildings over there. She has an aerial shot later in the presentation. The Mother House itself, which you have been in, you had a tour there when you were freshmen and you've been there for Mass. And then there's the high school, the actual St. Mary's of SMCC, the girls' school, the actual building and boarding school for all that, a dining hall. So it's not just the building you've been in. And they had to decide what they would do. So this is about that decision. So the first thing they became more and more aware of is that they had a responsibility in terms of the environment. This project is taking place around 2000, and while these are more current, they were known trends even then. So they became concerned that they were in this huge facility, huge, some 376,000, I think, square feet in just that facility, in the one they lived in the Mother House. And so they really wanted to be concerned about how were they using the resources of the earth and how were they impacting future generations by what they did. Because we can't think that how we live is separate. The things that we consume, the things that we buy, when you let that shower run for a few minutes to warm up, and when you take a 25-minute shower, you're using resources then that are not available to somebody else. And when you have perfectly good clothes that are, getting thrown away, or even if you're telling yourself that you're donating your clothes, only 10% of donated clothes are reused. Were you aware of that? So 90% of the clothes you are using are likely to end up in landfills, even if you're donating. So how we live does impact the world. Our consumerism, it impacts us here in this state. The efforts that we make, that bottom right corner, you're looking at the algae bloom in Lake Erie, which kills other things in the lake. So the IHM decided that even if our governments were not committing, they would have to be committing to it. They were concerned especially that the impact was on the poor. And there is truth to that. If it heats up 5 degrees every summer, you don't notice. You did not notice if last summer was 1.5 degrees on average more warm than the summer before, because you were in your air-conditioned workplaces and homes and cars and at the lake at your leisure, and you even practiced at air-conditioned gyms, so you were not impacted by the increase in heat. So the IHM wanted to call attention to all of this. They wanted to start being good teachers about how we treat our environment. They had 2 choices really only for their project. They could tear down the building and build new somewhere for what they needed, or they could renovate the building that they were in. It's interesting, they were 20 years ago, these ladies, but Pope Francis wrote about it as his first encyclical. I'm sorry I went past that so fast. Laudato Si, take care of our common home. So the very first thing he wrote to the world back in 2013 had to do with creation and how we're living there. So this is their facility. They're an aging population. It's been sad to me over the time she's made her presentations. I've watched that number climb down from the 300s and into 260 members. That's because they're dying off. They're older, they're in nursing care. They, excuse me, look at that, 95% of them are over 65, 95% of them. So they knew they needed a facility for the aged and with nursing care. They have a memory care unit for sisters there. And they had to think about they were going to die off. 95% over age 65, they're not going to be here for another 100 years, right? So they had to think about how would whatever they did be reused for however it could serve the people in Monroe. And they saw it as a part of their mission, this renovation, and how they handled it. They weren't just thinking of themselves, they were trying to think of your grandchildren. And they decided that they would renovate, that they would not tear down and build new. They would stay in Monroe and be important, to the people of Monroe, to the place of Monroe. Everything cannot just be abandoned buildings. I thought of that as I drove out past the mall the last time that I was driving home from SMCC. You cannot just have a place full of empty buildings. The renovation is huge. So the bottom of the screen is the back, the top of the screen is the front that you drive in from when you've been there. So you've only been in the mother house. That's on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side would be the school that you have never been in. It's been mothballed since the mid to late 1980s when the schools combined, Catholic Central, the boys' school, and that mother house. This project was going to cost some $50+ million. I don't remember, 52 or 56, one or the other, $1 million. So they had some investments they cashed in. They did a capital campaign and begged people to donate to the project. And then they took a loan for the rest. They searched for a bank whose investments mirrored the kinds of things that the IHM were concerned with. So, for example, they did not want a bank that invested in the cocoa industry, right? Known for forced labor and for child slavery. So they didn't want a bank who invested like in Nestle or companies like that. They found their bank in Ireland. So, and now 20 years later, they've almost paid the rest of that debt off on this renovation. They wanted to consider many things, and they wanted them to be a part of their life going forward. They have a report every April on sustainability from every department. Everyone working for the IHM, they're one of the single largest employers in Monroe. Everyone working for them, every department reports on their efforts along these lines. It's things like not using throwaway cups when they have a tour like yours. They gave you guys glasses that they then washed and reused. They didn't, contribute to landfill. They have things about the type of car they buy, so that if they buy a car, they buy a hybrid or an electric car, something that is kinder to the environment. They only pump gas before 8 in the morning. That's pretty interesting. Gas is volatile and it's evaporating as you pump it. So to get the most use out of the gas, it's best to do it in the coolest part of the day. Just anything and everything that you could think of. So it began with demolition. To get that heavy equipment in, they had to take off part of the side of the building. And they lifted it up on huge cranes. It's pretty interesting to watch. The contractor balked at doing recycling. He did not want to do it. He did not want the subcontractors to have to do it. He felt it would be expensive and that not much of what they took out would be reusable in any way. He was wrong. I don't know how many more things in your home than carpet are anti-environment. case you've never seen them, that picture on the right are radiators that were used for heat. Basically, that's what's inside the heaters in the classrooms you've been in these past 4 years. When SMCC renovated its windows, they got rid of half of their windows, the top half. There's just wall there. I have sayings painted on mine, but that whole well used to be giant windows. We lost all that natural sunlight. Of course, I'd never been able to show a video, probably. You've driven by this 100 times. It's not an accident, and they aren't being lazy. It was deliberate. And I don't know how long you think it takes to mow 11 acres, but it certainly did save on labor and equipment and gasoline emissions. So this is around the back. Gray water is going to be talked about in just a second here. It's part of the water they use in the building. This was always interesting to me. I don't know why you had a hallway that you walked down some steps down the hallway and back up the same steps in the first place. You've been down here. This is where your freshman meeting rooms were. So geothermal heat, this was pretty incredible. 450 feet deep if you've been to Washington, D.C. I think the Washington Monument's only slightly taller than that. When you and I take in air for our furnace, if it's 30 degrees outside, we're heating it from 30 to 70. They're heating it from 55 to 70. You can see the savings right there. Same thing with cooling. If it's 90 out and we're trying to cool it down to 75, they don't have to cool it at all. It's coming in at 55. Gray water is the reuse of water when we wash our hands or take a shower or something. That water goes out in the wetlands and nature purifies it enough to at least come back in a toilet. They increased showers and toilets actually when they built this and cut their consumption incredibly. Paint is actually not so hot for you. It gives off fumes you shouldn't breathe. The top right is cork flooring. There's original cork flooring in the building that did not have to be replaced in that building. It's incredibly durable and sustainable. You did not go outside, so I don't think you saw the decking, composite decking. There's no aspect of this renovation that they did not consider how do people live, how would it be used. It was award-winning. They now give tours and have groups come in to look at it. They teach about their renovation. It impacted them. It impacted Monroe. There's a viable building there that now can stand and be used for ages. The school still closed, right? So there's the difference. They put a viable thing into the community. God bless.